Hey guys, just made this cool campaign that you might appreciate if you are targeting guests that have been on a podcast. So went on Persona and did these two AI things. But before I did that, I had to find the guests, right? So I used Apify to scrape some guests on This Weekend Startup, which is Jason Calacanis startup. Shout out to Jason. So the campaign, let me see if it loaded. Not sure why it's taking forever. Did I even add it to the right campaign? Yes, I did. Okay, so the campaign looks like this. Let's clear filter. So it says I saw you on the Twist pod, right? So This Weekend Startup with Jason. I saw your Twist pod with Jason about NFTs and Daber Labs. Could get you on 20 VC, the Joe Rogan Experience, and Masters of Scale, right? So two AI lines. Got these lists off Apify, so I just scraped them on Apple Podcasts with Apify, imported them with Persona, and there's not a lot of details through these podcasts, right? There's just like the title and the description, which is useful for us. That is where we redirect the AI to find a guest, right? So the first thing we did here, we found, granted the podcast information and the title, returned the guest's full name, then returned their company, right? Through a different prompt, then returned their website fitting the first and second prompt. Then granted the full name, the company, and the website. Tell and yeah, like what you understand from the podcast. Generally, tell us what was the pod about, and return in this specific format. Saw your Twist pod. So that's one AI which we're going to include in the Apollo campaigns after we import them, right? And the second AI line is granted all the info that we got using prompts, return what podcast we could get them on through my company, podfire.com, right? So this is relevant for you, not necessarily if you have a podcast agency, but just as a podcast intro, the fact that you mentioned to them that you saw the podcast. So that's my agency here that I'm pitching in this email. But yeah, just mentioning that you saw their pods is better than like 99% of emails out there. And then you can tailor an offer specific with what you do, right? So for example, yeah, here, let's say that you have all the podcast information with them. It's like you can ask the AI to dive deeper with what they said in the podcast, and then you could filter only podcasts that talked about SaaS sales, right? And then you could be like, "Hey, I'm interviewing SaaS sales on my SaaS sales expert on my podcast," right? Or you could be, "Hey, I partner with SaaS sales experts so that they can promote my platform," right? So you take the data from the podcast, you enrich it, right? And then you mention to them in the first line here that you heard about them on X podcast, and then you return how you could help them regarding what you scraped on the podcast. So ultimately powerful. I think you guys should probably think of applying that. Apify is what I used to scrape the pods, but you could use a bunch of other scrapers. Also, I might use some other to scrape Spotify for podcasts or YouTube podcasts in the next couple of emails. I didn't do videos in the last couple of days. Was so busy with life and other things. So let me know what you think about that one. If you want the prompt for this one, or if you want the list, if this can be helpful.